In this lesson, we'll take a close look at the on-screen calculator that's available in the Integrated Reasoning section of the GMAT. However, before we do that, I'd like to point out that most, if not all, integrated reasoning questions can be solved faster without using a calculator. So you should use the calculator only after you've explored other, faster options, such as rounding and estimation. Remember that the GMAT is designed to test your number sense and your logic skills, not your ability to carry out lengthy calculations. For example, let's say that a certain question informs you that some population increased between 2008 and 2009, and your task is to determine the percent increase that this represents. Well, in the arithmetic module, we learned that we can use this formula to calculate percent change. Or we can calculate percent change by taking this fraction and then rewriting it as a percent. Now if we take this approach and plug in our two values, we can see that we have a somewhat cumbersome fraction to convert into a percent. And as you'll soon see, the on-screen calculator is so primitive that using it could easily take up a lot of your time. On the other hand, if we were to first check the drop-down menu, we'd probably find answer choices that look something like this, where the values are spread out enough to allow for some fast and easy estimation. At this point, we can apply the techniques we learned in the math modules. So to calculate the percent change, we'll first rewrite our fraction this way, where the plus sign tells us we're dealing with a number a little bit bigger than 15,000, and the minus sign tells us we're dealing with a number a little bit smaller than 12,000. From here, the numerator simplifies to be a number a little bit bigger than 3,000, and this entire fraction simplifies to be a little bit bigger than 1/4. Since 1/4 equals 25%, we now know that our fraction converts to a little bit bigger than 25%, which means the correct answer here must be 26%. That is how we solve these kinds of questions on the GMAT, without getting bogged down with a clunky calculator. Okay, so now that I've made my argument against using the on-screen calculator, let's see how this thing works. To begin, while you're in the Integrated Reasoning section, you'll see a calculator icon at the top of the screen. By clicking on this icon, you'll call up a calculator that looks something like this. To operate this calculator, you can either click the buttons directly on the screen, or if you wish, you can use your keyboard to enter values. Okay, now let's examine the buttons, beginning with these ones. This one is for division, this one's for multiplication, then subtraction, and then addition. This next one is called the change sign button. It changes the sign of whatever number happens to be in the display window. So if there's a 3 in the display, and you click the change sign button, the 3 will turn into -3. Conversely, if there's a -8 in the display window, and you click the change sign button, the -8 will turn into +8. Now, an important feature of this button is that if you want to enter a negative number, you must enter the positive version first, and then use the change sign button to make it negative. For example, if you want to multiply 3 by -5, you must first click 3, then multiply, then 5. Then, to turn 5 into -5, click the change sign button, and then click equals to get a product of -15. Now before we examine more buttons, I should point out that the on-screen calculator can make only one calculation at a time. This is very important because it means that the calculator does not necessarily follow the required order of operations. For example, if we want to calculate 2 plus 4 times 5, we know that we must multiply 4 and 5 before we add 2. The calculator, however, does not know this. If you press the buttons in the indicated order here, you'll get an incorrect answer. Because once you click 2 plus 4, the calculator is getting ready to perform this calculation as soon as you click any non-number button. So as soon as you click the multiplication button, the calculator calculates 2 plus 4 and is now working with the sum of 6. So once you click 5 and then equals, it takes that 6 and multiplies it by 5 to get 30, which is incorrect. So since the calculator makes only one calculation at a time, and since the calculator does not have a button for brackets, you'll have to enter your calculations differently to account for this. So for example, we can evaluate the above expression here with this sequence of buttons to get the correct value of 22. Okay, moving along, the next button to discuss is the square root button. This button automatically calculates the square root of whatever number is in the display. So for example, to calculate the square root of 49, just enter 49, and once you click the square root button, the calculator will automatically display the result. Okay, the next button to discuss is the percent button. This button automatically calculates the given percent of the next to last number. Here's what I mean. Let's say that a $40 shirt is discounted by 10%, and we want to know the new price. Well, one possible approach is to take $40 and then subtract 10% of $40. The on-screen calculator handles this calculation nicely. First, we'll enter 40 and then click subtract. Then we'll enter 10. At this point, when we click the percent button, the calculator automatically calculates 10% of 40 to get 4. And from here, when we click the equals button, the calculator subtracts this 4 from the original 40 to get 36. So the discounted price here is $36. Now on a similar note, if there happened to be a 12% tax on this $36 shirt, and we wanted to calculate the total cost with tax, we could do so by taking 36 and adding 12% of 36 to it. To perform this calculation, just press these buttons in this order, and the calculator will tell you that the total price, with tax included, is $40.32. Okay, moving along, this next button is called the reciprocal button. It takes whatever value is displayed and automatically tells you the value of its reciprocal. For example, if we enter 4 and then press the reciprocal button, we can see that 1 over 4 is equal to 0.25. Okay, so that takes care of the buttons that perform operations on numbers. Now let's take a look at these two buttons. They both allow you to clear all or part of your entries. To begin, this button is the Clear All button. It removes all numbers from the display and erases any calculations performed up to that point. Use this button when you want to start a calculation all over again. Now this next button is called the Clear Entry button. It removes the last thing you entered into the calculator. For example, let's say you want to add 32 and 71. So you enter 32, then plus, and then you accidentally enter 74 instead of 71. At this point, you could press the Clear All button and start over again. Or you can click the Clear Last Entry button, which essentially erases your last entry, but keeps everything before that last entry. So the calculator still remembers that you entered 32 plus, and it's now waiting for your next entry. So if you now enter 71 and click equals, you'll see that the correct sum here is 103. Now there's another button that handles input errors in a similar way. This button is the backspace button, and it allows us to back up one step and clear the last digit we entered. For example, let's say we want to find the same sum as before, and we correctly enter 32, then plus, and then we accidentally enter 74. At this point, we could click the Clear Last Entry button and erase the 74 from the calculations, but since we correctly entered the digit 7, we really only need to get rid of the 4 here. So if we click the back button, the 4 is now erased, and we can now click 1 and then equals to get the correct sum of 103. Okay, the last set of buttons to discuss are these ones up here. They allow us to store and retrieve numbers in the calculator's memory. Let's begin with the Memory Save button. This saves whatever number is on the display at that time. To demonstrate this, let's enter 7 and then click the Memory Save button. At this point, the calculator has stored the number 7 in its memory. Now notice that this M up here indicates that there's a number stored in the memory. Okay, let's press the Clear button here to erase the display, and we'll continue. Next, we have the Memory Recall button. It displays whatever number is currently stored in the memory. So, for example, if we later want to multiply 10 by 7, we can first enter 10, then click Multiply, and then when we press the Memory Recall button, our saved number appears on the screen. And from here, we can press equals to get a product of 70. Now at this point, let's press the Memory Save button again so that the number 70 is now stored in the calculator's memory. Now please note that if we had not pressed the memory save button, the old value of 7 would still be stored. Okay, let's now clear the display and move on. The next button to discuss is the memory add button. It takes whatever number is currently displayed and adds it to whatever number is stored in the memory. Let's see how this works. Now don't forget that the number 70 is currently stored in the memory. So if we enter a 9 and then press the memory add button, the 9 is added to 70 and the sum of 79 is now stored in the memory, replacing what used to be stored in the memory. So if we now click the memory recall button, we'll see that 79 is now stored in the memory. Now this memory add button is very similar to the memory subtract button. This button takes whatever number is currently displayed and subtracts it from whatever number is currently stored in the memory. Then it takes this difference and stores it in memory. So for example, if we enter 5 and then press memory subtract, the 5 is subtracted from the 79 in the memory, and then the difference of 74 is now saved into the memory. So if we now click the memory recall button, we'll see that 74 is now the number stored in the memory. Okay, the last button to discuss is the memory clear button. It erases whatever number is stored in the calculator's memory. So if we click this button, we can see that the M here disappears. Also, if we later click the memory recall button, we can see that the 79 is no longer there. Instead, the display shows a 0, which is the default value when there are no values stored in the memory. Okay, so that's pretty much how the on-screen calculator works. Be sure to test out this calculator long before test day. You'll find it on the free GMAT Prep Practice Test software available from the official MBA.com website.